Manelisi Dubase is at our Sea Point studio in Cape Town. He is with former President FW de Klerk to talk about his announcement on the unbanning of the ANC, the SACP and other liberation movements 30 years ago. Let's go there live. A very good morning to you, Manelisi.
Good morning, Desiree, and thank you very much for coming. And maybe just to remind our viewers that besides the unbanning of the political parties and the announcement of the release of political prisoners, President de Klerk also announced during that day a moratorium on death penalty and the end of a state of emergency that has been in place since 1985. That officially put the whole process of negotiations on the go. And right now, as Desiree just said, the man who was behind all that, President FW de Klerk, is right here. Thank you very much, President de Klerk, for blessing us with your presence, and welcome to the SABC.
Thank you. It's good to be here with you.
Thank you very much. Just take us back then. I mean, when you went to Parliament that day, when you went to announce all this historic announcement, what was behind all that?
Behind all of it was the necessity to do it. It was necessary to remove any excuse that the ANC could offer to come to the negotiation table. So the package I put together, me and my team, addressed all the concerns that could have been raised against coming to negotiate. What was behind it was the realization that apartheid was wrong, that apartheid has hurt people tremendously, that apartheid was morally unjustifiable, and that we had to turn a new page and begin a new South Africa. It was also the realization that if we carried on the old way, it would have all ended in catastrophe. There would have been a bloodbath in South Africa, and at the end of it, we would have to negotiate. So it was conscience-driven. It wasn't because of military pressure by the ANC. It wasn't because of sanctions. We did it because our consciences said we must rectify the wrongs of the past. We must begin a new dispensation.
But the pressure that was exerted on you and your government then, you can't write it off. I mean, the issue of sanction, the isolation of the country, clearly.
No, I'm not writing it off. It kept us on our toes, but we could have carried on. We had the strongest army in Africa. We could have carried on. But both we, from our side, and the ANC and Mr. Mandela realized that there was nothing to gain by carrying on in the old way, that we had to negotiate a new dispensation, that we had to start on the road of reconciliation.
And by then you have realized that apartheid was not sustainable, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. But apart from realizing that it was not sustainable, I realized that apartheid was morally unjustifiable. It was wrong. And I've apologized so many times for it. There's a fallacy that I haven't apologized for apartheid. I have. But we didn't only apologize. We did something about it. We initiated the negotiations which resulted in a peaceful transition towards a new South Africa with a new, very good constitution, a new South Africa which became a constitutional state, where politicians can't just do what they want to do, where the constitution is the highest law of the land, where there's a constitutional court, where there is in that constitution provision to fight against the abuse of power.
I too, I'm not sure if you have unreservedly apologized for this.
I have on many occasions.
What I've heard you the other day saying was that apartheid was not totally wrong after all. It's just that it was incorrectly applied.
No, I never said that. That it would be wrong to attribute that to me. I have publicly said just yesterday at a conference of my day before yesterday, on Friday, at a conference of my FW de Klerk Foundation, I reiterated the acknowledgement that apartheid was wrong. So please let's get that out of the way. People who say I'm clinging to apartheid, I'm justifying apartheid, are not talking the truth.
Let's then get it off the way. But in that conference we are talking about, this is what to say. You said between 1960 and 1989, South Africa entered a vortex of deepening isolation and escalating conflict. You continue saying, by 1986, my colleagues in the National Party and I had accepted that the only solution to this problem lay in dismantling the injustices of apartheid.
Yes, the injustices
and then you went on. You say, the 2nd of February 1990 was not the result of a Damascus conversion. Neither was it forced on us by the ANC, by sanctions, or any other external forces. Somehow you look like you are contradicting yourself there. No. While you say there was a pressure that was mounting, you also said, but it had nothing to do with our decision.
No, I don't say it had nothing to do. I'm saying what our decision, which I announced on the 2nd of February 1990, wasn't giving into that pressure. It wasn't because of the pressure. Yes, the pressure was there. Yes, it kept us on our toes. Yes, it was bad for South Africa that we were becoming more and more isolated. But it was conscience-driven. We wanted to dismantle the injustices of apartheid, acknowledging that it was injustice. And that is not contradicting.
And for what you paid a little bit of a price there, because Dr. Andres Streere, Fedi Hatzenberg, Eugene Terplan, all of them describe you as a traitor. Were you ever worried about your personal safety when your colleagues or former colleagues turned against you and describing you as a traitor?
Well, there are still people today describing me as a traitor who come from that old right wing. They still persist in calling me a traitor. Every time I make a public appearance on the social media, some of them come forward to say that. No, I don't lose any sleep about it, because I believe what I did was the right thing to do. It was the right thing before God, and it was the right thing between my fellow South Africans. I believed in it, and that's why we did it. So, no, I didn't lose any sleep about it, but yes, it was expected, was to be expected from Treurnig and Hartzenberg and those people to react that way. They were deeply shocked, but they wanted to cling to apartheid.
Who else was behind
And we abolished apartheid. Not the ANC, we abolished apartheid.
Wouldn't it be fair to say you jointly abolished apartheid?
Yes, no, we didn't do it on our own, but we started really the ball rolling with that speech on the 2nd of February 1990, which, by the way, just 30 years ago, more or less by now, I completed it.
I remember that day. But who else was behind this whole decision? I mean, in terms of people who were advising you and so on and so forth.
Well, I took my cabinet into my confidence. It was a joint decision. We had Bush conferences where we talked very frankly to each other, where we everyone could give his or her opinion. And from this emerged within the National Party cabinet, the top leadership of the National Party, a consensus that we had to do an 180-degree turn, that our efforts to make apartheid better, to make separate development more acceptable, have failed. That we only could bring justice to all by really abolishing apartheid and by embracing a new vision. And that new vision grew during the later 80s. The new vision of one united South Africa, with all forms of discrimination to be taken off the statute book, with a vote of equal value for all South Africans, but a new South Africa with a strong constitution, which will be a constitutional state, with safeguards against the abuse of power. A new South Africa united in its efforts at eradicating racialism and becoming a non-racial state.
Looking at that decision now, and looking at what has been happening in our country, especially the so-called 9 years or 9 wasted years under the former president, do you sometimes regret that you handed over the country and some people messed it up?
No. With the advantage of hindsight, all the major decisions I took today, as I sit here, I would take again. knowing what I know today. The 9 lost years isn't because we did what we did 30 years ago. The 9 lost years didn't come about because we have a bad constitution. The 9 bad years came about because of the failure of the ANC under the leadership of Mr. Zuma to uphold the constitution, to uphold good governance. So I don't feel that there are reasons to feel guilty about what happened under President Zuma. The onus rests on him and those who stood around him during those 9 lost years.
But another thing we haven't said much about it is that when we were handing over the country, it was already in a mess. We had a huge debt. We were isolated economically, politically, and otherwise. And the ANC took it over. We had a 5% growth. We've written off our debt. We paid it off. So the ANC, if I can use your language, at the cook, 80 mark.
But can I just say that on Friday in a speech I said, I'm making a plea for the ANC to return to the years under President Mandela, under President Mbeki, to return to the pragmatic policies which led to the cutting of our national debt, to return, please return to the pragmatic policies which resulted in 5% growth around about 2005 and 2007. But it was the SA Communist Party and COSATU which worked together with the ANC Youth League to work President Mbeki out and to bring President Zuma in. And it was under President Zuma that the deterioration started, that we lost that advantage. So I give recognition to the ANC for the good work which was done from 1994 to 2007.
Do you worry that much as things started very well, it looked like today things are getting worse? You have the right-wing organization pulling to the right and the left-wing organization and nothing left in the middle. Does that worry you?
I'm very worried about that, yes. I'm deeply concerned. I haven't lost hope, but I think we must pull it back. Also in the speech on Friday, I said, we're no longer at the crossroads. We've taken the wrong road. We are on the wrong road at the moment, and we need to turn back, and we need to do the right things now. And I called upon civil society to come onto the playing field even stronger than they are. We all need to take hands and make South Africa succeed. It has a tremendous capacity to become a very successful country. But then we must stop stereotyping races. We must stop racializing everything again. We must truly become a non-racial state. And all of us must take hands and we must work together. We need to address the great poverty out there. We need to address the high unemployment, more than 10 million people not working. Those are the challenges we face.
And we can do that by affirming those who were left out of the economy previously, isn't it?
It must be done. They must be brought into the economy. But somehow or another, too much is being done to protect just existing jobs instead of creating new jobs. We need policy certainty so that investors can again invest in South Africa. We need to get this debate about Section 25 out of the way. Section 25 need not be amended. It's putting off investors. We're not getting the investment we need to get the economic growth we need to begin to address unemployment in a meaningful way. So yes, President Ramaphosa have tremendous challenges. And we need the internal debate in the ANC to be settled. Because while this internal debate is raging, nothing is really happening which should happen in South Africa.
Now, you told me that you took your cabinet with you when you were engaging in all this dialogue and taking these decisions. Who else outside your cabinet were you consulting?
Well, we weren't really consulting. We consulted technical people throughout. We always opened ourselves to expert advice. But we weren't it was the negotiation process in South Africa, different from many others in the rest of the world, was something between South Africans themselves. And that sets us a bit aside from other peace processes where international forces are constantly involved. Yes, ambassadors and governments from overseas wrote to us, talked to us, tried to influence us. They did the same to the ANC. They played a role. But the real negotiations took place between South Africans having a vested interest in what was decided.
So are people like Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi didn't have personal influence on you before making this decision?
All of us influenced each other, not before. No, not before. It was a National Party decision. With me as leader of the National Party and as National Party president of the country. It was an initiative, it wasn't negotiated. What the package which I announced on the 2nd of February 1990.
Then you triggered the road to the negotiations, and then you met Nelson Mandela, who was your partner throughout the process. When first did you meet him, and what did you think about the man?
It was in December 1989. He was brought from the Victor Verster prison under cover of darkness to my office in Tuinhuis here next to Parliament, which later became his office. And we had a discussion, not talking about the things we would negotiate about later. It was really a discussion in which we tried to assess the other person. And both of us later wrote in our respective autobiographies. After that discussion, we have developed a feeling, I think I can build trust with this man. I think I can do business with this man. And there was a mutual respect born that day, which notwithstanding later tensions between me and him at times.
I remember those.
We never lost that basic mutual respect. I found him to be an extremely dignified person, highly intelligent, analytical in his approach, a good listener, and one has to be a good listener to be a good leader. I was impressed by him, and I remain impressed by him to this day.
And you joined him on the government of national unity as the second deputy president. And then suddenly you took your party out of the government. And that was the beginning of the death of the National Party.
There was a reason for me taking the National Party out of the government of national unity.
What were those?
Two reasons. The one is the ANC. I was also leader of the opposition. The ANC wanted me to silence me, to speak outside against any decision by cabinet where I disagreed in cabinet. I insisted I have the right, even if I'm deputy president, if I disagree in cabinet, to also disagree publicly about such decisions. The ANC said, no, you have your chance in cabinet, thereafter you must defend that decision. That was the one reason I took us out.
That was a fair decision, wasn't it?
The other reason was, we wanted, in the final constitution, a consensus-seeking model, and we made a proposal that there should be, next to any future cabinet, if the party has a majority, it forms the cabinet after the first 5 years. But we said there should be a consultative council on which all the major parties could serve, to which all matters of national interest should be referred, in an effort to first get a consensus on how this challenge, this national problem should be approached. And if a consensus was reached, then that would become the country's policy. The ANC said no to it. I didn't get the support of the IFP on it. I didn't get the support of the DP on it, so I didn't have 1/3. And that is my greatest regret. I still think such a model, where we, instead of fighting everything, where we could approach national issues, national problems, severe big problems like we have today, for instance, in the economy, on a basis of working together rather than shouting at each other in Parliament.
But don't you think that that was a recipe for the failure of coalition government even up to today?
That's not coalition government that I'm advocating. That first 5 years was a very unnatural coalition. It was an enforced coalition because the ANC already had a majority. So it was an effort to find consensus and to continue the negotiations beyond the start of the new government for the first 5 years. The proposal we made was for after the first 5 years to have this consultative body, this consensus building body next to the cabinet, not dominating the cabinet, not having a veto, but being there to find solutions. That they rejected, and that was a pity, I think, that they rejected it.
But in hindsight, I think there's something else you regret, that led to the demise of the National Party, because we are not used to being an opposition party.
I think what led to the demise of the National Party was that the National Party lost its course. It went off course. National Party did not stand for what it used to stand for. I think I'm highly critical of my successor as leader of the National Party, which finally dissolved the party without having a proper Congress and really handed it over to the ANC.
But what it stood for was apartheid, and apartheid was dead.
No, the National Party took leave of apartheid already under my leadership. It was no longer the apartheid party, it was a non-racial party. In the election, more than 2/3 of brown people in South Africa voted for the National Party. More than 50% of the Indians voted for the National Party. And about 500,000 black South Africans voted in 1994 for the National Party. We were a truly non-racial party. That is the legacy I left behind me, not an apartheid party.
And as we conclude, Mr. de Klerk, can we agree today with what the United Nations said about apartheid, that it was a crime against humanity and it was evil?
I don't fully agree with that. I'm not justifying apartheid in any way whatsoever.
But why can't you agree with that? Because it wreaked havoc to millions of South Africans.
It did, and I apologize for that. I profusely apologize for that. But there's a difference between calling something a crime, like genocide is a crime. Apartheid cannot be, that's why I'm saying this, cannot be, for instance, compared with genocide. There was never genocide.
But there was a mass killing of
under
people.
apartheid. There were many people died. Yes,
mass imprisonment of people.
But more people died because of black-on-black violence than because of apartheid.
But the apartheid system was also involved in those black-on-black
Absolutely.
violence. I mean, we have heard.
Absolutely. For that, I took steps about that. I appointed the Goldstone Commission. We fired or put on early retirement more than 28 senior officers in the Defence Force. We took steps. I called together all the top people in the Defence Force and all the top people in the police and say, you are no longer involved in politics. Your task is to safeguard the people of South Africa. That's your task and your only task. So we did take steps. We didn't look away, and we identified and tried to identify the elements who were against my policies and against my government's policies continue to be involved in political violence. Political violence was a scourge which unfortunately came like a shadow at times with the negotiations and led to tragic consequences.
And finally, at some point, did you feel that you were losing a grip on government?
I never felt that I was losing my grip on government. I always felt that I had the government behind me. I always felt that although they didn't like me very much, there was no risk of a coup, a military coup. We were doing the right thing. I believed in it, and I never felt alone. I felt I had a team around me who would support me.
On that note, Mr. de Klerk,
thank you very much
for your time.
Everything of the
good
best.
To see you.
Thank you.
You too. Thank you very much. That is it on our part here with Mr. FW de Klerk. From all of us here in our studios in Sea Point, is back to Johannesburg. Bye-bye.